That's corruption.
Yeah,
It's
so it was
corruption.
intentional. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and it starts out little, but it just, well, I got away with that, so let's push the envelope a little farther. And I'm sure that if you were so inclined, if you were in a position where you had this checkbook that nobody checked on, you'd probably
Human
write
nature.
checks.
Yeah, you talk about these people that come into Congress on $170,000 a year salary, there for 6 years, and walk away with $40 million. How
Yeah.
does it happen? Yeah.
Yeah, and they're bought before they go in. Somebody said to me, "Why don't you run for Congress?" I said, "Look, imagine if I ran for Congress. I don't have any money, so I'd have to find a guy to front me. And this guy gives me a check for $10 million. How do I say no to him?
Right.
When he asks me for something?" And they're bought before they ever get in there. They say they're corrupted by the system. Bullshit. They're corrupted before they get into the.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to Markets and Madness. As we say, this is the place where we discuss the madness that happens when politics, economics, and personalities all move in different directions. Tim and I we're on once this week. A lot's happened. It seems that every day is another month in the new administration. There's so many things that go on. One thing I wanted to point out is it would really help us if you're watching this just to do a quick subscribe, ring the bell, get some new content. We've gotten a lot of comments and we really do appreciate it. So please pass your comments on, positive, negative. Let us know what you're thinking. I try to respond to as much as I can. Um, and this is a channel where we discuss ideas, and you guys decide if our ideas are right, wrong, and where we go from there. Having
Sound like
said
Dean
that,
Martin, Fred. You keep those cards and letters coming in because my Jeannie and I, we read them.
showing our age once again. Keep those cards. I think I'm going to go over to the couch and sing a little song. Dean. Well, as I just started out by saying, a lot's happening this week. Taking over Gaza, the U.S. AID. But the thing that got me in terms of markets, which I think is the most interesting, is the comment from the new Treasury Secretary. He's not focused on what the Fed's doing. He's focused on the 10-year. And, we've talked a lot about the bond vigilantes. The Fed just controls the front. The bond vigilantes control the back. You finally got somebody in power, a Treasury Secretary that gets it. Trump's previous secretary, I had to look it up last night. Do you remember who Trump's previous Treasury Secretary was?
Sure, Larry Kudlow.
No. Munchin. Yes. Munchin. Yeah. Kudlow was the Council of Economic Advisors, right? And like he made no impact, Munchin. I really look it up just to see exactly what he did and what was going on. But I thought that was a very interesting point. What are you thinking?
Yeah, well, the 10-year is the key to the real estate industry.
Yeah,
And the real estate industry has been traditional key to the economy. Just you only have to look at 2008 to convince yourself that that was
exactly.
the case. Mortgage rates are keyed off the 10-year, and the 10-year is, but I don't know how he controls that. What does he not issue 10 years and issue everything else on the curve? You got a big debt to fund.
I think the way he controls it is by getting inflation down and having the market do it.
Very easily getting inflation down. What
Yeah,
is that thing?
easier said than done. But he's in the blurb that I saw. He's going to get oil prices down, right? Getting
Yeah.
oil prices down, as we've said, that's the first leg because that impacts everything else in the economy.
Yeah, energy prices in general, yes.
Yeah.
There's that. There's an argument about tariffs, whether or not tariffs inflationary. There's so many variables to that, but I guess in the end, I'd have to conclude that since we're really a net importer, tariffs are going to influence prices a bit on the upside. But offsetting that, and I think the bigger offset is regulatory reform. If he cuts
Yes.
regulations, that's really disinflationary.
Yes.
And the other thing about tariffs is they encourage competition, and that is disinflationary as well. But I think as long as we import, there will be some tariff impact.
I saw a video last night from Victor Davis Hanson, and he was talking about tariffs. He said normally tariffs are in place for a certain product or a certain industry. And you pinpoint a certain country because of a certain product that you want to get growth on. But this isn't the case. He says every country that he's dealing with is more a diplomatic issue, and it's what we've said.
That's the
It's
bigger
more,
issue. It's not
yeah,
a trade issue.
right,
It's a leverage issue. I want you to get do something on the border. I want you to stop the fentanyl. It's not your steel is too cheap and you're subsidizing your steel. It's a
exactly,
whole different
exactly,
animal.
exactly. So the idea of tariffs that we've been brought up with aren't the same as what he's trying to do. Whether he accomplishes it, whether he's right, wrong, indifferent.
Nevertheless, they probably are marginally inflationary,
Yeah,
I would think. But
yeah, and
you offset that with regulatory reform. That's massive.
we've said a number of times you're going to have to live through the pain. That there's going to be some pain initially, and you still get reporters and you still get people in Congress saying egg prices are still too high. Well, it's been
Yeah.
3 weeks.
But we have MDS now, Musk derangement syndrome.
Oh yeah.
I watched Elizabeth Warren shriek yesterday, and they're shrill. I mean, and he's, I've often said, how many dead people are collecting Social Security? And somebody gave me a statistic yesterday. I don't know if it's true, but what he said to me was they've uncovered that 2,000 people are over the age of 112. I don't know if that's true,
Okay.
but I
All
wouldn't
right.
I wouldn't bet against it.
And our average lifespan is declining. Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's so much.
Yeah. I don't know
Right.
how Peru is going to live losing that comic book for trans children, $32,000 or the $2.5 million. I mean, some of the numbers are going to be ludicrous. And the more they scream about them, these are positions that are indefensible.
And their argument is no one elected Trump. Well, no one elected to send all of this money to these other places that U.S. aid has uncovered. Your argument is specious. It doesn't make sense when you're what you're arguing against. It really is.
Really indefensible arguments. I mean, there's no other word for it. How can
Yeah,
you defend this stuff? How did it happen? It's how did we get here?
you have to break it in order to fix it.
I've often said that, but then the system broke in 2008 and the solution was worse. They just threw money at it.
Right, right. Because it didn't really break. It got to the point where it bent all the way down, and then they were able to bolster it again. It didn't fully break. But I think what we're trying to do with aid and funding and audits, that's changing the picture.
Yeah, yeah, it really has. And the more things come to light, the more appalled you are at what's been going on.
It's just, this is a cartoon, you can't make it up. But exactly what they've done, it's a Saturday Night Live skit about all of the crazy expenses. And they don't deny anything and
I
fighting an
listen,
audit.
I listen to Schumer, and I hear Foghorn Leghorn saying, "Come here, boy. You built too shallow, son. I say the big ones go over your head, boy." Guacamole and beer. He's worried about the beer and guacamole for Super Bowl Sunday.
He's the
Really?
same guy that would try to humanize himself on July 4th that showed he was cooking burgers on the grill and there were raw burgers with cheese on top. So the grill wasn't even on, like
So like,
anybody knows.
so like Elizabeth Warren sneaking a beer during the.
Yeah,
Her, I mean, it's so transparent. It really is.
they really are. It's sad to see, but things are coming to light, and I think that's what we need to see more of it. We need to see more.
Yeah.
With Rubio, I saw something with Rubio talking about U.S. aid. And he said, this wasn't the first conversation we've had. We've tried. He said, the idea of USAID makes sense, and we don't want to stop funding people that really need it. But we've asked to see what they're doing, and they refused. So the president put me in charge. He says, and now we're just seeing what they're doing. It's not rocket science.
Yeah. Well, I think he'll get something done because he's speaking to them in Spanish, which is helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to wonder, I mean, how much of this really. And the sad part about it is you have to put the brakes to it first. You got to stop everything and say, stop the machinery. Let me have a look at this, You got to shut stuff down And even the good stuff gets shut down with the bad stuff, but
Hmm.
there's no other way to address it. I
Right.
don't think anyway.
No, I agree. And the left is screaming about it.
It reminds me of your neighbor who was a white collar guy trying to be a blue collar guy who rented the Ditch Wish and he didn't know how to shut it off and it was
Jay,
eating. It almost took his house apart. He had to wait for it to run out of gas.
it was climbing up the side of the wall of the house.
Yeah.
And finally, the
You know,
gas meter.
we're there economically. We're there at a wholesale level, really.
And you got to question, was this intentional or was just people that dumb to let
Not
this go
dumb.
on?
Not dumb. It's corruption.
Yeah.
It's
So it was
corruption.
intentional.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and it starts out little, but it just, well, I got away with that, so let's push the envelope a little farther. And I'm sure that if you were so inclined, if you had were in a position where you had this checkbook that nobody checked on, you'd probably
Human
write
nature.
checks.
Yeah, you talk about these people that come into Congress on $170,000 a year salary, there for 6 years, and walk away with $40 million. How
Yeah.
does it happen? Yeah.
Yeah, and they're bought before they go in. Somebody said to me, "Why don't you run for Congress?" I said, "Look, imagine if I ran for Congress. I don't have any money, so I'd have to find a guy to front me. And this guy gives me a check for $10 million. How do I say no to him? When he asks me for something." And they're bought before they ever get in there. They say they're corrupted by the system. Bullshit. They're corrupted before they get into the system.
Yeah. Just going through the process.
Look what it takes to get elected. Now look at Michael. We had Michael Riley here, and there's an honest guy. I know. One of the guys in my group ran against Bernie Sanders in Vermont.
Really?
Yeah, he ran against that, but he was actually a basketball player for the Boston Celtics. Yeah, big tall guy, nice, great guy, and he ran against Bernie Sanders. He hates Bernie Sanders.
Okay.
Yeah. So the markets are somebody on one of the TV shows said something interesting, and he sort of encapsulated what I've been thinking, is that the markets are Trump's report card. I would argue that it's like the monthly, quarterly report card, but his real report card is the midterm election.
Hmm.
But he's not going to let the markets drop. He'll launch a balloon to inflate it if it gets in trouble. I mean, he's a capitalist. I really was surprised to see that we're going to have a hotel on Gaza.
In Gaza. A Trump
That
hotel
would
in
blow me
Gaza.
away.
Yeah, I'm kind of confused about that whole process, but we got to see what the real plan is. And it's
There's a
not just a
picture
thought
floating
balloon.
around the internet with him and Bibi Netanyahu sitting in lawn chairs looking out of it. It's a great picture. Sunning themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's got to be fleshed out a little bit more before we can make some real choices about what's going to happen there.
Yeah. But he's making some real reforms. No doubt. No doubt. I mean, things are happening at remarkable speed.
Yeah.
And stuff is getting lost in the shuffle. I mean, nobody has mentioned to me that Denmark is spending $2 billion for defending Greenland. I mean, that was a big deal. I looked up their GDP. It's an enormous piece of the GDP.
Hmm.
Their defense spending, the 2% NATO requirement, they were at like 1.7. So they were up there. And $2 billion throws that number way up. I don't know what percentage it is of the GDP, but it's significant. And now they're going to and all he did was say, I want to buy Greenland. And $2 billion is flowing into Greenland defense, which is what he wants in the first place.
Yeah, and I think people are looking at it like Trump's the bully, and he is. He's using the power of the pulpit and he's using his voice to get things done. But it's things that should have been done 30 years ago. That slowly and slowly, as you say, the creep has gone on for so long that he's just tired of funding the world's, I don't know
You
if it's
know,
problems or issues.
when you talk to somebody much younger than us, it strikes me that everybody thinks the world started the day they were born. You know? So you talk to a millennial, somebody like that, and when you talk to them about the kinds of things that we've seen and traded with, I mean, to me, maybe because I think the world started the day I was born. The first time I became aware that things were really in dangerous shape was when I started to trade currency at a bank. And I realized that the dollar that we had pinned all our post-war hopes on blew up, and the entire system collapsed. Bretton Woods collapsed, and Nixon finally put an end to it and said, "Okay, I'm closing the gold window," which was the linchpin for Bretton Woods, and that was a function of the Great Society and the war in Vietnam being funded by a Fed rather than revenue.
Hmm.
All of them, enormous spending. HEW, Health, Education, and Welfare, which doesn't even exist anymore. It's Health and Human Services and the Department of Education. But
Right.
HEW alone had a bigger budget than all but, I think, 3 or 4 countries in the world. HEW had a bigger budget than Canada, than France. And there was one department inside our bloated bureaucracy. And that was 1965, 66, we started to see the thing come unglued.
With society.
And that was what, over 50 years ago,
60.
60 years ago. So you set a machine, your ditch witch example, set it running and let it run for 60 years and see what kind of damage it's done. And we're there now.
Yeah.
It's unthinkable. It really is unthinkable.
Yeah. You mentioned closing the gold window. Gold is now at all-time highs again.
Yeah, and the dollar is too. So explain that to me. Usually the dollar and gold
Yeah.
move inversely, but gold is going up.
Yeah. I was listening to somebody yesterday talking about $3,000 is in the tank. It's going, and crypto's still holding its tongue at 100,000, give or take.
We had a long conversation about crypto yesterday, and one of the guys raised an interesting point. He said, there is really no barrier for entry to competitors. I mean, if crypto is based on computers finding prime numbers and assigning prime numbers, if that's what it is, what if I create software that assigns the square root of prime numbers? I mean, or the cube root, where does it go? So I went out, I bought 2 books to give out. I went on Amazon yesterday, and I ordered 2 books for 2 friends as a result of that conversation. And the books it's one book really, but it's Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds.
Madness of crowds. Yeah.
I said, you got to understand bubbles. And, we think the world started the day we were born. So we think this is unique. But look at the South Sea bubble and look at the tulip bubble and look at the Mississippi Corporation bubble. And we've seen these before. Crowds get crazy. And maybe that's what cryptomania is.
I remember sitting at the desk
For me.
at Manhattan, and this is 1988, 89. Bruce, Dave Harbison, right? And Bruce, noise going on, everybody screaming and yelling, and Bruce puts down the phone and said, "Just got a call from somebody in Chicago. This guy's got a model. It only clicks every 100 years." And he said, "Buy sterling." And everybody got real quiet, sort of looked at him, and Harbison said, "What was the last recommendation? Sell tulips." And then we all went back to what we were doing.
You just reminded me of a story, and I'm sure you know the story. Barclays Bank, during the war for the Falkland Islands,
Yeah.
somebody must have had a little chart, because if the Argentines had Exocet missiles, and Exocet missiles started to sink British ships. So somebody must have had a little chart, because if a British destroyer went down, sterling dropped like 150 pips,
Right.
a cent
Right.
and a half. And the aircraft carrier Hermes was on his way to Falkland Islands with troops. So everybody was watching the aircraft carrier, and Frank Dunphy is sitting in Barclays, New York, and he looks up at a screen and he sees carrier lost, and he screams out to London to Chris Paolo, "Chris, they sunk the Hermes." And Barclays globally starts shorting pounds, selling hundreds of millions of pounds. And I was in a broker's office at the time, a Eurodollar broker. And I said, "What the hell's going on?" I watched sterling drop like 2 cents. They sunk the Hermes. They sunk the Hermes. Really? I didn't see anything on that, And there's a teller rate guy sitting in Barclays, New York, saying, "What the hell's going on here?" And Frank says, the aircraft carrier, look, carrier lost. And he says, oh, yeah, hold on a sec. Puts two wires together and the message disappears. It was the communications carrier, not the aircraft carrier. Barclays had to cover all those shorts and buy back. It was wild. So you take an event like that, and we've seen it. I mean, that's a real story. That really happened. We're in that kind of market now, where a frenzy, it just takes one thing. A couple of weeks ago,
And it's machines that are doing it within
that's
milliseconds.
true, yeah.
Yeah, within milliseconds.
Look at the story Alex told us, right?
Yeah,
They got a
yeah,
call from the regulators saying one of your traders is spoofing the market.
that's right.
It was a bot that they created. That
Yeah,
was 4 years ago.
yeah,
That's happening now. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the
It's so
inmates are
true.
in control, clearly.
Yeah, I'm curious as to how that's all going to play out. There's going to be deregulation, and some of it's good, some of it's bad. But I think we still need some barriers. We still need some checks and balances, especially in the financial sector.
I mean, I had a quick ride on crypto. I bought some ETFs. I bought that trust before it became an ETF. And, I watched it go in my favor from like 60,000 to 90,000. Then I got out. And I'm watching it go to 100 and people talking 200 and God knows where. And maybe it will, but I got to tell you, I'm an old dinosaur. I don't understand crypto. I understand I don't understand blockchain, but at least I have some semblance of understanding about blockchain. And I always thought that blockchain was a great solution to things like mortgage markets in third world countries, where you buy a piece of property and somebody buys a judge and you're out. So having a blockchain ledger going out to a million different people, verifying
This
a
season.
transaction, I think that's valid and that's workable. But to build a cryptocurrency against it, but spend an hour talking to a millennial. I had a conversation with a woman about 4 weeks ago, and I said, well, it does represent some kind of a solution to counterparty risk. And she had no idea what I was talking about. The risk was lost. And she didn't understand it, so therefore it did not matter. And I wonder how many of those people own crypto.
The story I always tell about crypto was going back, I guess it's about 4 or 5 years ago. I had a friend who was working at one of the LPs, liquidity providers in the crypto space. He came from an HFT background. I knew him from Chase way years prior. And I called him up and I said, Rob, what can you tell me about crypto? He said, the only thing I can tell you is don't ever sell it. I said, well, you're not giving me much. He said, no, I said, I'll explain. So we were going to do some, his Robinhood was just coming online, the platform. He says, and I put a couple of grand in a Robinhood account and I played around with it just to see what it was like. And I forgot about it for a couple of years. So one of the interns on the desk came to me and said, you got a Robinhood account? And this is like, 3 or 4 years later. He said, you got a Robinhood account? Do you mind if I log in and play with it? He says, yes, I got a couple of grand in it. Go play with it. This kid came back about 2 hours later and says, have you checked that account recently? We said, no, why? It's got 350 grand in it. So the couple of grand that he put in exploded. He said, so don't ever sell it.
Somebody said the first crypto trade was a guy who bought pizza for 4 or 5 bitcoins or
Yeah.
something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, my neighbor next door was telling me about a friend of his grandson. Guy's a millennial, made his money in crypto. Jimmy doesn't know how, doesn't know the details of it, but apparently he's getting divorced and he's offered his wife a couple of million and she's not happy with that.
Well, who would be, really? You know.
Now, I don't know what a couple of, no, several million. He offered her several million, but she's not happy with that.
Well, let's
And where
face
did
it,
these
she
people
earned
get
it.
the money?
She earned it.
That's, where do these people get the money? I said, well, yeah. And that's when I told them the story about Rob and Robin Hood.
How many
But yeah,
people have lost their account number? I wonder about that.
and,
I
and
hate to be a denier. I mean, I'm staring at it. Somebody told me at $4 I should be buying Bitcoin, and then somebody else told me at $44 I should be buying. And I knew if I bought it at $4, I never would have made it to $44. I would have sold it and probably sold it short and impoverished my lineage throughout history.
that goes back to the old story about Billy Gilbert told in the CDS markets. They were short the the CDS, like when '08, when everything blew up. He was in a hedge fund in London, and they'd short it, made tons of money. They were recognized as the hedge fund of the year in Euromoney. He says, and the day we went to collect the award is the day the fund went bust because they made so much money. The guy said, this isn't going to go on. I'm smarter. Turned, shorted it, and the market
That was the
still
end of
went
it.
up. Yeah, it still went up. And he said, the day we collected the award is the day that the fund blew up.
That would be a great book, Famous Disasters, and we probably know a few of them.
Yeah.
One of them was in the snow market.
Rod Snow into Stanley Cup goals.
Yes, well, this market, I'm afraid of it, and maybe I shouldn't be afraid of it because,
Too
there's
easy,
good
you mean?
reasons to buy it.
Right.
This is we're at a historical point, but I think timing has always been everything. And you could be at a run. How many people, had a chance to buy IBM or Xerox when it was $4, and they sold it. My father-in-law, Gus, he bought Long Island Lighting instead of Xerox, 1958 for his retirement. There's a million stories like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, read something a guy was saying this morning. He says, I've been bearish for the last month. He says, my buddy's been bullish for the last month. We're both frustrated because really hasn't moved. The market goes up, market goes down. You feel like you're on the verge of something breaking out, and it never does.
Yeah, well, we talked about that. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I know in my meeting I said, this might be a good time to go hide
Right.
in treasuries. The 10-year at that time was like around 470.
Right.
You could just sit it out because volatility is exploding. If you want to take a position, buy puts and buy calls. You could be on both sides of this thing, you know. But me, I think
And trade it.
trim my sails.
Yeah, you're not using the option as a directional play. You want to use it as a volatility play and
Yeah,
trade it.
exactly.
Yeah. Buy gamma.
That's probably still the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. There's tape bombs all over the place. There's comments that'll make it go up, and there's comments that'll make it go down. In all sectors, whether it be the dollar, whether it be
Well,
equity markets.
when we had this conversation about crypto, I said, we have a concept called sovereign risk, and it's absent in crypto, but there's an offset to that. I mean, when you buy a bond or a security and it sits inside a country, maybe the United States, maybe Venezuela, to take two sides of a coin, you have a sovereign risk attached to it. But crypto doesn't really have a sovereign risk. It's a digital number that sits in a series of computers throughout the world.
Mm-hmm.
So where's the sovereign risk? And to me, the sovereign risk is a country saying, we have a court system, and you rely on our court system. You rely on a contract being enforceable. So therefore, if you enter into an arrangement in the United States under U.S. laws, you're relying on the U.S. court system and the U.S. system of contracts. You're relying on our legal system. To me, that's the sovereign risk. So if a sovereign, like a Congress or a president, through a congressional act, were to say, and it's a reach, but were to say that any contract that is satisfied with crypto, any crypto, Ethereum, anything, is unenforceable in our courts. We're going to call it null and void. To me, that's damaging, and that's a sovereign risk to crypto. But that's really what it would take. It would take something like that, and then there would be some country that would say, well, it's enforceable in our courts, I suppose. And
Right.
depending on your contract, if your do you have any standing in Switzerland if a contract is done in the United States? Who the hell knows? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I see what they do in the U.S. court system where they find the jurisdiction that's going to favor them, and that's where they go.
Yeah, but the initial contract is written. I do a deal with you, and I agree to pay you in Bitcoin. And
Right.
in my crazy scenario, Congress says no contract enforceable or satisfied with crypto is enforceable in a U.S. court. We did the contract in the United States. the contract was subject to U.S. laws. I can't go shopping for another jurisdiction and sue you in Switzerland for a contract done in New York.
Well, you could, but it's not enforceable because Switzerland can't attach anything to you unless you have assets there. If you have assets there, then they may be
I
able to
still don't
attach it.
know if the contract, if the face of the contract says it's subject to U.S. law, which it probably does, right? There's boilerplate that says that. I don't know.
I don't know.
Get a couple of lawyers that argue this point.
That's
Maybe it
right.
might make a good podcast.
Yeah, $40,000 later when they argue
But I
it.
always wondered whether or not that was a factor. But we're in that kind
Well,
of world.
I think overall that regulations and legislation is loosening, especially here in the United States, and it seems like throughout the world that governments have become more crypto friendly.
Over 50 years ago, I read a book called Future Shock, and I don't think any book affected me quite like that book did.
You've said that before, yeah.
So many things that he said that I looked at, I thought, this guy's thought it through. And one of the points he made was that our legal system has fallen behind our technological advances. And I don't know whether or not he made the point or I concluded that something like cloning was on the horizon. And what kind of rights does a clone have? If you get cloned, what kind of rights does that have? So I started thinking about that, and I thought, yeah, you spend 20 years in court arguing those kinds of points. And crypto has those ingredients. So I don't know enough about it, really. I mean, I'm the wrong guy to ask. But to me, we haven't really worked that through. We haven't thought that through. Yet, literally billions, maybe trillions of dollars
Oh, yeah,
being committed to that.
yeah. And you're starting to see big institutions partner into it now.
Well, you got the government talking about a repository. What the hell does
Yeah,
that mean? A crypto
yeah.
repository. Are we going on a crypto standard instead of a gold standard? I don't know.
On another note, this morning payrolls came out and they were a lot less than expected.
Yeah,
You
well,
think that matters at this point? Does it influence the Fed? Does it matter if the Fed is influenced?
well, first of all, you got to wonder about the validity. How many of those are migrants running to the corners, not showing up for work because ICE is at their door? I don't know. And in the scheme of things, if Fed policy has been relegated to a minor event, I think suspect payroll numbers are five subsets down from that. So I don't really pay it a lot of attention.
Yeah, I would agree. As I said, I started by saying that the Treasury and the executive branch is focused more on the 10-year and what that does to the economy rather than the overnight rate.
That's more sound, though. I think it's
As we've said many times, the Fed controls the front and the market controls the back, and the back is where the economy really is driven.
you can't manipulate the 10-year very easily. The
Right,
Fed tried it with yield curve control, and that blew up in their face.
right. So we'll get to see the way that plays out.
Well, okay, I think we're about
Yeah,
let's
we got a
go
Super
find
Bowl this
somewhere else.
weekend, so for our U.S. Viewers, you picking a side? There's the conspiracy theory. Listen to this one. I think I may have mentioned it to you a couple of weeks ago. Dean was saying that once they put out the Super Bowl logo, and they normally do that at the beginning of the playoffs, you'll know who's going to be in the Super Bowl. You use the colors of the team. This year, it's green and red. Green being the Eagles, red being the Chiefs. He says, and the dominant color is the winner. And the dominant color seems to be green, you know?
Well, I thought Buffalo was going to do it,
I did.
and I still think they would have done it if they started the running game early enough. But they started a run on Kansas City during the second half, and by then Kansas City had them.
Yeah, it was a couple of bad calls that really changed the focus of the game. And they looked at, I've seen them analyzed a couple of times. Bad spots.
Yeah, that's true. That spot was
The third down spot was worse than the fourth down spot.
yeah. Yeah, that spot was a big deal. Whether or not it meant the game, I don't know. But I think it's all about Cincinnati's defensive line,
Kansas City's defensive line.
Kansas City's defensive line. Sorry,
Yeah.
I got the red color, but
Yeah, that's right. If Saquon can run like he's been It should be an interesting game.
Guy's a phenomenon. He's like the new Barry Sanders. He
He
runs like
couldn't do
that
it for the
stuff.
Giants. Barry Sanders was different in that he could spin on a dime, and when he did score, he just quietly handed the ball to the ref and
Well,
walked
in
away.
that sense, yeah. But talking about spinning, see the first play of the game last week?
Yeah,
It
I did.
was two spins on that run, and he ran for a touchdown.
Broke out of the. But my point is, he handed the ball quietly off to the
Yeah,
referee, like
he
you've been
did.
there before.
He
I've done
was
this.
the
No big
gentleman's
deal.
spike.
That's right.
All right, Fred.
All right, Tim.
Have a
Yep.
good
Have a
weekend.
great
Enjoy the
weekend.
game.
You too. Bye.